My name is Ashley. I'm 33 years old, and I've spent almost 10 years walking through older people's homes, looking for the small things families often miss. That is not how I describe it at parties. At parties, I say I am an occupational therapist, that I help older adults stay safe in their own homes. But the truth of the work is smaller and stranger than that. I look at a bathroom and I see where a bad fall could happen. I look at a stairway and I notice the step a tired person might misjudge at night. I have learned to see a house the way age sees it. I never once thought I would need that eye to protect my grandma from people inside my own family. Welcome back to Rose Untold Stories. This is the place for people who learned, usually too late, that the person trying to keep someone safe and the person trying to get someone out of the way can use exactly the same words. If you have ever watched that happen to someone you love, stay with me tonight. Let me start from the beginning. The most important person in my life has always been my grandma. Her name is Opal. She raised me more than my parents did, in a small house at the end of a quiet street in a town in the North Carolina mountains, the kind of town where the pharmacy still knows your name and the leaves turn early. She has lived in that house for most of her life. My late grandfather Harold built the back porch himself. She still keeps his tools in the shed, oiled, though she has not let anyone use them in years. My grandma is in her 80s now. She has slowed down. Her knees are bad, her hearing is worse, and she has a habit that turned out to matter more than anyone guessed. She turns her hearing aid off when she is tired of listening to people. She just reaches up, clicks it off, and lets the room talk around her while she sits there looking like a small old woman who has stopped keeping up. Everyone in the family had decided that was what she was, a small elderly woman who had stopped keeping up. Everyone except me, because I know the difference between a person who cannot hear and a person who has simply decided you are not worth the battery. I want to be fair to my aunt here, at least at the start, because for a while I genuinely believed she meant well. Lorraine is my grandma's older daughter, my mother's sister, and Lorraine had gotten it into her head that my grandma was no longer safe alone in that house. She said it gently, at first, in that soft, worried voice people use when they want you to think every decision is only concern. She told the relatives my grandma had left the stove on, that she had gotten dizzy on the stairs, that she had been confused about her pills. She also started saying my grandma was imagining things, that my grandma claimed small items had been moved when nobody had touched them, that she could not find her reading glasses because she had probably put them somewhere strange, that the little table by the hallway had always been there, even when my grandma insisted it had been moved closer to the stairs. At the time, it sounded like forgetfulness. Later, I understood it was preparation. Some of what my aunt said I would learn was exaggerated. Some of it never happened at all. But that came later. If you have ever had a family member start describing someone you love as helpless, and felt something cold move through you before you even knew why, then you already understand the feeling I could not name at first. The thing that made me uneasy in the beginning was not only what my aunt said, it was who had started coming around with her. My aunt had a fiancé. His name was Dale. He was in real estate, or he had been, before whatever went wrong with his money went wrong. I did not know the details then. I only knew that he had the too smooth manner of a man who is always calculating the resale value of the room he is standing in, and that he had started taking a very warm interest in my grandma's health. That was the part that itched at me. Dale had never cared about my grandma. He could barely remember her name at the last family gathering. And suddenly he was the one driving my aunt to check on her, the one asking careful questions about the house, about the street, about whether my grandma had ever thought about what the property might be worth. Looking back now, I think I knew something was wrong weeks before I let myself say it. But my grandma was still my grandma, still sharp, still making her own jam, and it felt disloyal to her to treat her like a prize two people were circling. So I did what I am ashamed to say I am good at. I stayed quiet. I told myself I was being patient. I have since learned that what I call patience is sometimes just fear wearing better clothes. What I did not know was that the street my grandma lived on had caught someone's attention. The far end of it was being eyed for development, and a house like my grandma's, old and stubborn and sitting on a good lot, was worth a great deal to the right buyer if only the stubborn old woman inside it could be moved somewhere else first. Quickly. Quietly. For her own good, of course. I did not learn any of that from a document. I learned it the way you learn the hardest things about your family. By accident, standing in a room they did not know I was in. I want to know who is here with me tonight. Drop a comment and tell me the city you are watching from, and what hour it is where you are sitting. I have found that the people who stay for a story like this one are often the ones who once had to protect someone who was being quietly overlooked. The day it started to come apart, I surprised my grandma with a visit on an ordinary afternoon. I had not called first. I still had my own key, but before I could even reach for it, the front door opened. My grandma stood there with her face pale and her eyes sharp. She grabbed my wrist, pulled me inside, and shut the door softly behind me. She put her mouth close to my ear and whispered so softly I almost missed it. "Quick! Hide in the sewing room. Don't make a sound." I stared at her, too stunned to move. Then she squeezed my wrist once and whispered the part that made my skin go cold. "They think I can't hear anymore." I did not understand. But I have learned to trust that woman more than I trust my own eyes. So I went into the little sewing room at the back of the house, the one with the old machine and the boxes of fabric Harold's mother had left her, and I stood in the dark behind the half-open door. A few minutes later, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Then the front door opened. My aunt's voice came first. Then Dale's. Then a third voice I did not know. A man's voice. Professional. Rehearsed. Through the narrow crack in the sewing room door, I saw him step into the hallway with a clipboard in his hand. I did not know it yet, but I was about to hear exactly how you slowly push a living woman out of her own decisions, one polite sentence at a time. The first voice I recognized was my aunt's, then Dale's. And then the third one, the man I did not know, someone with the too smooth tone of a person who had practiced sounding official. From behind the sewing room door, I could not see them clearly, but I could hear everything, which was exactly what my grandma had wanted. The stranger with the clipboard was walking through the house, narrating it as he went, and what he described was not the house I had grown up in. He talked about the stairs like they were a serious concern. He talked about the bathroom like a woman could lose her balance in it, just by standing up. He called the kitchen a hazard. He kept using the phrase, unsafe for independent living, over and over, the way you repeat a thing you are going to write down later. He was not simply inspecting the house, he was building a case against it. I heard Dale say, lower, that the report needed to make the house look bad enough that it could not be argued with. He said it plainly. He was not even careful. I think he had decided my grandma could not hear, and that no one else was home, and when a man believes no one is listening, he tells you exactly who he is. Then, my aunt spoke, and this is the part one have gone back and forth on ever since. Because my aunt did not sound like a villain. She sounded like a frightened daughter. She talked about how my grandma had fallen once, months ago, on the back step. She talked about how she could not sleep for worrying. For a moment, I almost believed her, almost forgave the whole thing. Because that part was real. My grandma had fallen once. My aunt had been scared. That fear was true. And that is what Dale had found. Not a lie to build on, a real fear to twist. But then my aunt said the thing that took the last of my doubt away. She said that by Thanksgiving her mother would not be living here anymore. She did not say it like a worry, she said it like a schedule. I stood behind that door with my hand pressed flat against the old sewing table, and I understood that this was not about my grandma falling. This was about getting my grandma out of the house, out of the decision, out of her own life, quietly, before the holidays, while everyone told each other they were doing it out of love. I did not come out. I want to be honest about that, because part of me wanted to throw that door open and end it right there. But I had learned, in 10 years of walking into rooms where families were deciding an old person's future, that the moment you make it a fight, you lose the thing that actually wins, which is the truth, calmly held. So I stayed still. I listened. I let them finish. And when they finally left, and the front door closed, I came out of that room shaking, and my grandma was sitting at the kitchen table, looking at me, completely calm, like a woman who had known for months and had simply been waiting for a witness. Then she told me, quietly, that she had heard all of it. Every visit, Kuki, every phone call, and not just heard it. She had noticed the small changes too. Her sewing basket moved from the side table to the hallway chair. Her reading glasses placed in the pantry instead of beside her book. The loose rug appearing at the top of the stairs after she had kept that hallway clear for years. Every time she mentioned it, my aunt smiled sadly and told her she was getting mixed up again. That was the part that hurt my grandma most. Not the house, not the money, the way they tried to make her doubt the room she had lived in for half her life. They talked in front of her like she was furniture, because they had all decided she could not hear, and she had let them, because a woman who is thought to be deaf learns more than a woman everyone is careful around. That night I did not sleep. I lay in my old room, the one my grandma keeps made up for me, and I ran through it the way I run through a bad safety assessment. Because here is the thing they did not know about me, the thing that turned out to matter more than anything. This is my job. I evaluate whether older people can safely stay in their homes. It is the entire thing I do. My aunt had brought in a strange man with a clipboard to prove my grandma's house was dangerous. She had forgotten that her own niece did this for a living, and did it well, and could not be fooled by a rearranged rug and a loosened screw. Because that is what I started finding the next morning, when I walked the house slowly with my professional eyes on instead of my granddaughter eyes. The rug at the top of the stairs was in the wrong place, and suddenly I remembered what my grandma had said the night before. Things keep moving, Ashley. She had not been confused. She had been reporting evidence. My grandma has kept that hallway clear for years. A habit from decades of living alone. Someone had moved a loose rug right to the edge of the top step, exactly where a foot might catch. The grab bar in the bathroom, the one my grandfather Harold installed himself, was loose, and when I looked at the screws, they were not worn loose. They were backed out, clean, deliberate. Every single concern in that house had appeared after Dale started visiting. I sat down on the stairs when I understood it fully, and I did not cry, though I thought I might. What I felt was worse than crying. It was a flat, clear anger, the kind that does not shake, the kind that starts making a list. Someone had walked through my grandma's home and quietly turned it into evidence to be used against her. Not because it was dangerous, because they needed it to look dangerous, long enough to move her out and move a buyer in. If you have ever watched someone manufacture a reason to take away another person's choices and call it caring, then you know why I stopped thinking of my aunt as only family that morning. From that point on, she was also someone building a case against my grandma's independence. I want to tell you what I did, and I want to be honest that most of it was not dramatic. It was paperwork and phone calls, and one long week where I barely slept. That is the part these stories usually skip. The truth is, protecting someone from a quiet erasure looks a lot like being very organized while you are very angry. I started with the thing I know how to do. I did a real home safety evaluation on my grandma's house, the kind I do for strangers every week of my life. I measured the stairs. I checked the lighting, the thresholds, the bathroom, and I wrote down, in plain professional language, what was actually true. The stairs were safe with a second railing. The bathroom needed a properly installed grab bar, which it had until someone loosened the one that was already there. The kitchen was fine. There was nothing in that house that a few small, ordinary adjustments could not make safe, and nothing anywhere that justified pulling an 80-year-old woman out of the only home she had ever loved. Then I did the harder thing. I took my grandma to see a doctor who had never met my aunt, never met Dale, had no stake in any of it. I wanted someone neutral to sit with my grandma and simply talk to her. He did, and he wrote, clearly, that she understood her situation, understood her choices, and had stated plainly that she wished to remain in her own home. On paper, in a way no consultant's report could argue with, my grandma was competent and my grandma was staying. The money part was the thing that made me the most upset. My aunt had started helping my grandma organize her bills after the fall on the back step. At first, it looked harmless. A daughter helping her mother sort mail, set reminders, keep track of repairs. But buried inside that help were forms my grandma had signed because my aunt told her they were only estimates, only safety consultations, only preparations in case the house needed small changes. They were not small. When I looked at my grandma's accounts, there were payments going out that she had not fully understood she was approving: home safety consulting, emergency care preparation, advisory fees. All of it flowing, one way or another, toward companies connected to Dale. It came to just under $20,000. My grandma had been quietly paying the people who were building the case to remove her. If you have ever found the proof that someone was taking advantage of a person while calling it love, then you know I had to sit down on her kitchen floor for a minute before I could keep going. I did. I sat on that old linoleum with my back against the cabinet, and I let my hands shake because there was no one there to see it and no one to pretend I was fine for. Then I got up, because my grandma was in the next room, and she had been strong for months, while everyone treated her like she was already gone, and the least I could do was match her. Here is the thing I keep coming back to about my grandma. Everyone thought she had stopped paying attention. But a woman who is treated like she cannot hear learns to listen in a way the rest of us never do. She had known, for a long time, exactly what was happening. She had just been waiting for one person to walk in and believe her. I almost did not come that day. I think about that more than I should. The review was set for a Thursday. My aunt had arranged it, because my aunt believed she had already won. She had called the social services worker herself, the way you confidently invite someone to witness your victory. Dale would be there. The consultant would be there, with his report. And I understood once I saw the shape of it that this was the moment. Not because I wanted a scene. Because it was the one room where all of them would be standing together, in front of someone official, and I would only get to say it once. The morning of the review, my grandma did something I did not expect. She put on the good dress. The one she saved for weddings and Sunday mornings. She sat in her own living room in that dress, small and straight-backed, with her hearing aid in and turned off, letting them all believe she could not follow a word. My aunt ran the room like a tour. She walked the social worker to the stairs and talked about how her mother could fall. She walked her to the bathroom and pointed at the loose grab bar as proof that my grandma could no longer be alone. She went to the kitchen and told the story about the stove issue, her voice catching in exactly the right place. She played the frightened, devoted daughter, and I have to give her this, she was good at it, because part of her believed it. That is what made it so hard to watch. My aunt had told herself this story so many times that she had half convinced herself she was doing something kind. The consultant opened his report and used his rehearsed phrases: high risk, unsafe for independent living, immediate relocation recommended. The social worker started taking notes. I let it go on longer than was comfortable. I want to be honest about why. Part of it was strategy, letting them lay out the whole performance so there would be nothing left to add later. But part of it was just fear. Even then, even with everything in the folder on my lap, there was a girl in me who did not want to break the family's silence in a living room. Families like mine teach you that keeping the peace is your job, and that lesson does not leave your body just because you have decided to stop obeying it. Then the consultant said the words immediate relocation again, and the social worker wrote them down, and I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I told the social worker that before anyone decided my grandma could not live in her own home, we should probably talk about who had spent the last few months making this home look dangerous. The room changed. You could feel it, the way a room changes when the story everyone agreed on suddenly has a crack in it. I opened my own evaluation first, and I spoke in the flat professional voice I use every day, because that voice is harder. I laid out that the house was safe with minor, ordinary modifications, and that this was my actual profession, not a favor I was doing for a relative. Then I pointed out the things that did not add up. I told the social worker that my grandma had been saying for weeks that things in her house were being moved, and every time she said it, my aunt treated it like another sign that she was slipping. But the moved rug, the loosened grab bar, the changed placement of her things, none of it proved my grandma was confused. It proved someone had been changing the house around her and then asking everyone to doubt her. Then I showed the physical concerns one by one. The rug that had been moved to the exact edge of the top step, when my grandma had kept that hallway clear for decades. The grab bar with screws that had been backed out clean rather than worn loose. The stove problem that had appeared. I looked at Dale then for the first time and I said that every single concern in this house seemed to have appeared after he started visiting. He started to say something. I did not let him have it. I laid out the payments, the consulting fees, and the emergency preparation charges flowing to companies he was connected to. Money coming out of my grandma's account to fund the case against my grandma. The social worker stopped writing about the stairs and started writing about that, and that was when my grandma stood up. She did it slowly. She reached up, and she took out her hearing aid, and she set it on the arm of her chair where everyone could see it. Then she looked around the room, at my aunt, at Dale, at the consultant who had described her home as unsafe, and she told them, in a voice that was perfectly clear, that she had heard every conversation they had ever had in her house. Every plan. Every phone call. She had heard all of it, because they had decided she could not, and she had let them believe it, and she had waited. The consultant started gathering his papers. Dale had gone quiet, and my aunt, the devoted daughter, finally lost the role she had been playing. She said the thing that was underneath all of it, that my grandma had always cared more about everyone else, that the house should have been hers by now, that it made no sense for an old woman to sit alone in a house that could be worth so much. Every word out of her mouth did the work I never could have done. The social worker heard, in real time, a woman stop pretending to protect her mother and start resenting her out loud. My grandma did not shout back. She looked at her daughter for a long moment, and then she said quietly that my aunt had never wanted her safe. She had wanted her gone. And there is a difference, she said, and everyone in the family had known that difference for a long time and had chosen not to say it. I will not pretend the aftermath was clean or fast, because it was not, and I promised you I would not arrange this like a story. But the short version is this. The review found no reason to move my grandma anywhere. The consultant's report was removed from the file, and his name went into a formal complaint for submitting a misleading safety assessment. The social worker noted, formally, that my grandma's wishes had been ignored, and that the file had been built around concerns that did not match the actual condition of the home. The payments to Dale's connected companies were reported for review as suspected misuse of an older person's funds. My grandma's bank accounts were secured, her permissions were changed, and every payment that my aunt had arranged under the excuse of safety planning was pulled into review. My aunt was removed from any say over her mother's care, appointments, money, or home decisions. Dale lost the house he had already spent in his head. A few weeks later, he left town. I heard, later, that the engagement did not survive the investigation or the loss of the property he had been counting on. My aunt and I do not speak now. I want to tell you I feel at peace about that, and mostly I do, but not entirely. She is still my aunt. When I was small, she taught me to braid, sitting on the back porch Harold built, and I remember that being one of the happiest afternoons of my childhood. Both things are true. She braided my hair on that porch, and she tried to push her own mother out of the house on the other side of that same wall. I have stopped trying to make those two women fit into one person. Some people you just have to hold in pieces. My grandma is still in her house. We made it genuinely safe, the real way, the way I would for any client I loved. New railing on the stairs, proper grab bars installed by someone who wanted them to hold, a call system by her bed. Better lighting in the hallway. Not to shrink her life. To hold it open a little longer. She did one more thing, near the end of all this, that I did not see coming. She set up a small fund in Harold's name, a modest one, to help older people in our town stay in their own homes when family or money or fear starts pushing them out. She asked me to run it. So now I do the thing I did for my grandma, for other people's grandmothers, the ones who do not have someone with the right eyes to walk in on the right afternoon. I want to know one thing. Who in your life got treated like they had already left the room while they were still sitting right there? Tell me about them in the comments. Tell me their name. I think a lot of people are quietly being written out of their own lives, and I think somebody should say their names out loud. Here is the thing I understand now that I did not understand before that Thursday. I used to believe that protecting your family meant keeping everyone at the same table, smoothing it over, never being the one who made the room uncomfortable. I do not believe that anymore. Sometimes protecting your family means refusing to let one of them be quietly pushed aside while everyone at the table calls it love. My grandma was not the problem in that house. The problem was that some people had decided her home was worth more than her voice. And the most painful part was how close they came to convincing a room full of decent people that taking away her choices was an act of care. I'll keep bringing you more stories like this, and I'll see you in the next one.